Okay, so where did I put my eraser? There it is. All right. So no, wait. There we go. That in no way affects anything other than my not falling asleep. All right. Today's class is also basically the rest of the semester. We have 4 more classes. None of them are probably going to use the whole class period, so you'll probably be getting sent on your way early. So the plan, I've taken attendance, so I can check that one off. Second thing is going to be business. So basically, I just want to run through what we're going to be doing for the rest of the semester, business-wise. There are some dates that are worth highlighting. So today is 11:30. Today, we're going to be talking about theses or theses, however you want to call it. All we're going to do is talk about them, practice them, say what we're looking for, what a good thesis is, and prepare you for what is due next class. So Thursday, upcoming Thursday, 2 days from now, you have an assignment due before class. It is a thesis assignment. We'll be talking about what it is today. So by the end of class, it won't be a surprise. However, I'm not going to be grading them till Friday afternoon. So if something comes up and you can't get it to me right before class, not a big deal. Just get it to me. The point of this is so you can practice writing theses and I can give you feedback on them so that you have some idea of what you're doing and have gotten some additional support. All right. Then, so today we're talking about theses. The thesis assignment is due Thursday. Thursday, we are going to be talking about outlining and planning. And so basically what this will be, well, how do you turn a thesis into a plan for an argumentative paper? Then you will have due the following Tuesday an outline assignment, which is basically just you come up with like a bullet list of what you think each paragraph will be, and roughly speaking, what you'll do in that paragraph. We'll talk more about that next class. But this assignment that's due Thursday is going to be 8 total sentences. This one is going to be like 16, but they're going to be short and not too rigorous, etc. Next Thursday, so a week from this Thursday, is our last class. We will come here. I will have the Zoom set up, but we will probably not do much more than just talk about any questions anyone has leading up to the papers. If you have extensions, you can ask me. If you want to have any questions from anything during the semester, that's what that class is, and then we say goodbye. But it's not going to be a full period either. This Tuesday class, as well as the outline assignment, what we will then be doing is talking about how do you turn an outline into a full paper. You've got a plan. How do you fill it in? You can think of it, an outline as a skeleton. Writing a paper is you add flesh to a skeleton. So how do you add flesh to your skeleton of a paper? That's what next Tuesday will be. Thursday is going to be nothing. Now, the paper is officially due end of day, Friday, the 17th. I believe that's correct. I'm like 95% sure. I just don't remember the numbers correctly. What that means is you just turn it in on Blackboard. If Blackboard's not working, you can email me. This right here is the official due date. Now, it's finals, it's COVID. If you need an extension, I am going to be like with the midterm. If you need an extension, ask. I will almost certainly give it to you. Now, one thing I will say, however, is if you are somebody who wants to use this opportunity to get feedback on your final copy about what you can improve in the future, given traveling for holidays and finishing how long it takes me to grade, I am going to need a paper that you want feedback on by the official due date. Otherwise, I'm not going to have time to give you the in-depth feedback you deserve. So if you want feedback, I do need it by this date. If you just want a grade and you really don't care, I'm setting a hard deadline of the 22nd. Basically, the end of the day on the 22nd is the last time that I'm going to have. So basically, if I'm not giving feedback, I can grade a paper quickly and get it into the grade book. So if something comes up and you need a couple extra days and don't care that much about feedback, I will give people till the 22nd. And of course, if you have an emergency or something, you can go past that. But basically, anything later than the 22nd, it's going to be outside of emergencies, impossible for me to give you a grade before it goes into the grade book. So basically, official due date, and if you want feedback, hard deadline. If you just want a grade or you need a little extra time, actual hard deadline after the 22nd. I'm not going to have enough time. Hannah.
Just to be clear, so the hard turn-in still be on Blackboard, not like a real paper.
Exactly, yes, everything will be on Blackboard. Also, though, what I will say is, if you are for any reason not able to turn it in on the 17th, shoot me an email just for safety's sake. If I don't hear from you and it's not in there, I won't know whether you tried to turn it in and it didn't work. I won't know whether to expect it. And it's much better to reach out to me ahead of time and just be like, hey, professor, here's the situation, as opposed for waiting for me to have to reach out, because there's always a chance I miss that you didn't turn it in, and then you end up with an F on the semester and things aren't good. But yeah, these are the official deadlines. So the things you need to know, you've got a short assignment due on Thursday, you've got a short assignment due next Tuesday, and then you've got a paper due on the 17th, where if something comes up and you need a couple extra days, you can get it to the 22nd. All right, any questions on the businessy stuff? All right. So that's that. All right, business done. So today's topic then is thesis. First off, let's thesis. Who's heard of this word? Let's just make sure everyone has seen it. Has everyone seen the word thesis before? Are people familiar with it? All right. Computer people, you all have heard or seen the word thesis before? Thesis. So it's out of the realm of the shininess. They're getting a reflection right through thesis. So what then is a thesis? If you were to have to give a short definition, what would you, and there's not a right answer here. I mean, there are many wrong answers, but there's not like one set right answer. What generally, if a teacher's talking about a thesis, what are they talking about?
A topic sentence.
Say that again.
It's like a topic sentence.
Yeah, it's a topic sentence. It's tied in with what your topic sentence is. Got it. What were you going to say?
I was going to say like the main idea of a paper.
The thesis is the main idea or the topic sentence. Now, in an argumentative essay, and we said last class, we're writing an argumentative essay. And an argumentative essay is one in which you're arguing for something. You're trying to persuade someone of a particular conclusion using reasons. You're not threatening them or anything like that. You're just giving them reasons. In an argumentative essay, your thesis is simply put what you're arguing for. That's all it is. It's a statement of what you're arguing for, and roughly how. So what you're arguing for, and roughly speaking, how you argue for it. So just to give an example, let me slide this over here. So those of you on, can you see this, computer people? Can you see what the top one says? Here's a statement or a sort of topic. Some people think New York City is the best city in the world. Others disagree. What do you think? This is the sort of thing that is a topic that you theoretically could write an argumentative paper on. And so as an example of a thesis on this topic, you could give something, a thesis would be something along the lines of, New York City is the best city in the world because it has the best food. That would be an example of a thesis. So what a thesis is simply, a thesis is simply two parts. Part one, you state what your position is on whatever the topic of your paper is. And part two is you give a general idea of what reason you're going to use to convince someone of it. So part one, what you are, what you are claiming is true. Part two, why others should accept your claim, or slash, another way of putting that is what reason you have to think your claim is true. So in our New York example, part one would be, NYC is best city in world. And then part 2 is just a because it has the best food. That right here is a thesis. That's all it means. It's one sentence in which you state what you'll be arguing and how you'll be arguing it. So with that in mind, if this is one possible thesis on the topic, where was our topic? Some people think New York is the best city in the world. Others disagree. What do you think? What's another possible thesis you could give then? So first off, what's another claim you could have about New York City? If it's not the best, you could say what? It's the worst, or simply it's not the best. So what then might be a reason you could give for New York City not being the best? They're playing. Olivia.
Garbage everywhere.
There's garbage everywhere. What are some others you might want to give in this part of your thesis? That's one reason. What's another one you might give?
Loud.
Rats. Rats, it's loud. So here would be a thesis then. We just combine these together. New York City is not the best city in the world because it has an extremely high rat population. There's garbage everywhere and it's loud. That is a thesis on a topic. That is all that a thesis is those two-part sentences. What it is you're going to be arguing for, and then a because, and explaining, generally speaking, what reasons you'll give in the paper for it. And the way you can think of the overall paper is all it's doing is unpacking your thesis. So if we go back here to this New York City one, if this was your, let's say it has the best food and best culture. Well, then everything you're doing in the rest of your paper is just expanding on this. Everything you do then is going to be arguing that New York is the best, and then you can structure the paper out of explaining why it is true that it has the best food and why that makes it the best, and what it is that shows New York has the best culture and why that makes it the best. So you could structure your paper in which you have a couple paragraphs about New York's food, a couple paragraphs about its culture, and a conclusion explaining why those things together make New York the best city in the world. That would be a paper that you would write with this thesis. So you can see how the thesis is really everything you say in the thesis. You don't do anything more than that in the rest of the paper in a certain sense. You're just expanding on this central claim you have at the start. And so this is why the thesis is the most important sentence. It's basically, it tells your reader exactly what is to come in the rest of the paper. And it gives them a nice, clear idea of how it's going to go. And it allows you to have a plan. Just from your thesis, you now have a plan of how your paper is supposed to look. You have that all throughout your paper, you're going to be arguing New York is the best city. And then somewhere in the paper, you're going to discuss its food. Somewhere you're going to discuss its culture, and somewhere you're going to explain why the culture and food together make New York the best city in the world. That's all that, in a certain sense, paper writing is taking this, or argumentative paper writing. You take this thesis, you turn it into a longer version that just expands on this central claim. Any questions on the what the thesis is issue? Netta, is that it?
It's supposed to be in a sentence.
Yeah. A thesis, you can get by with a couple sentences, but generally speaking, you can. So if it ends up being very, very long. So for instance, if you were writing a very long paper in which you were arguing that New York is the best city because it's got the best history and the best food and the best culture and the best this and the best that, you might want to say, in this paper, I will argue that New York is the best city in the world, period, space. To do this, I will first explain why it has the best food, and then explain. So in that sense, you can unpack it and make it longer, but generally it's just one idea of here's what I'm saying, and here's what my reasons for it are. And usually in a paper that's the length of the one for this class, you can do it in one sentence. So it's usually the way it will be is the statement first, a because, and then usually a couple of reasons that you're going to give to support that claim.
But the because is going to be separate.
So it'll be because, and then it'll be a couple different. So it would be something like it has the best food and it has the best culture. You don't usually want to just do it has the best food. You want to try to give a couple different reasons for it. But the general idea is just, what is your key idea and what are your reasons? Now, that's the first thing of what is a thesis. Rather straightforward, since you've heard them before and we've just gone through them. Now, the next thing is, how do you go about writing one? How do you go about picking one? And here's, I think, the best way to think about it is think about it in a few steps. When you're looking at a paper prompt for anything, and so step one is, or I guess this would be step 0. What type of paper am I being asked to write? For this class, you already know the answer to that. What's the answer? What type of paper are you being asked to write? Argumentative, yeah. So that's, you know. Then the next question is, what question is being asked? And I guess, what are the possible answers? So, to give an example, here is something else that a person, presumably in a history class, could ask you to write. Who do you think is the most important person in history and why? So, if this is the question that's presented to you, so step 1 in trying to decide what would a thesis be for this question. Well, what question is being asked and what sorts of answers or what possible answers are there? So, simply put, who's the most important person in history and why? What are some possible answers to this question? If this is a question and you're being asked to come up with a thesis, what are some things that would be reasonable answers and what are some things that would not be reasonable or acceptable answers to this question? So if you wrote your essay on this, it might be okay versus that, which wouldn't. Who's got some ideas here?
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King. So that is a good one because, for one thing, it's a person. It's a person and a historically important one. So you could look at this and say, oh, that is one of the possible answers. What are some others? And there's no, I mean, there's some wrong answers here, but there's not. If you say a person, there's probably, you're in the right ballpark. I don't know, Alexander the Great, George Washington, Cleopatra, like you. Not a right answer, 42. 42, not an acceptable answer. My left foot, not an acceptable answer. So in some ways, it's a very straightforward sort of thing, but it's important to break it down into small, bite-sized, easy parts. So the first thing you ask yourself is, what question is being asked and what the possible answers are? Now, once you've thought about the possible answers, you can then choose. The next thing you have to ask yourself is, what do I think is true / the right answer? So once you've figured out what the possible types of answers are, you just have to sit there and ask yourself, well, what do I think the answer is? Or what do I want to argue for in my paper? Or what do I think would be an interesting conclusion here? But usually the best way to do it is just, what do you think is the case? So who do you, in this case, you ask yourself, who do I think is the most important person in the history of the world? And you just ask yourself that. And there's many different answers you could give here. But then the key is step 3 is, what would convince someone else that I'm correct? So you ask yourself, once you've figured out what you think the answer is, remember the point of an argumentative essay is to get someone to accept your conclusion with the reasons you give them. So once you've figured out what you think the right answer is, ask yourself, why do I think that's the right answer? And once you've done that, you can start to construct whether those would be reasons that would convince others. So for instance, you could say something like, I believe that Martin Luther King is the most important historical figure. And then I start to ask myself, why? What are the reasons and what would convince other people? Well, then you just bring up his influence in the civil rights movement and the way things have changed. Those are the sorts of things you'd be asking in this sort of case of what sorts of possible reasons could I give for this? So that's the thesis plan. Let's run through it just to practice one. All right, so, and what you do then is for once you run through this, sorry, I should have finished this. Once you run through this, what you basically do is steps 2 and 3 are your thesis. So what you do in this case is part 1 of the statement is just Martin Luther King is the most important person because, and whatever his important role in the civil rights movement and bringing equality to the United States, something like that. That would be the sort of way you turn a thesis from this way of approaching it. So let's do a practice one. So here's this question. What's a better pet, a dog or a cat? Step 1, you can't see it, computer people, too well, I don't think. But actually, I might be able to move it over so you can see it. So step 1, what do we ask ourselves? We ask ourselves, what's the question being asked and what are the possible answers? What question is being asked and what are the possible answers here? So dog is one possible answer. What's another possible answer? Cat is another possible answer. There's technically speaking a third one too. What the third? Neither or equal. Yeah, none would be you could say neither of them is a better pet because lizards are way better. But yeah, the idea is you have 3 possible answers: dogs, cats, none. They're equal in some sense. So that's the first step. You've now established what the possible arguments for this topic are. The next step is now to ask yourself, what do I feel on this topic? So ask yourself, what do you feel? What's a better pet, a dog or a cat? How many dog people do we have? How many cat people do we have? How many completely neutral people do we have? Okay, now, that's the next thing you do is you ask yourself, what do I believe? So which one do I want to argue for in this paper? And then you ask yourself, all right, what reasons would I give to convince someone that I'm right? So dog people, those of you who said dog, what is a reason you would give that dogs are better than cats? They're loyal. Dogs are more loyal.
They're friendly.
They're friendly. There's more companionship. Got it.
I was going to say the same thing. I can't think of another one.
No worries. All right. So let's now unconditional love. That's another one. Let's now talk about, we've now run through these 3 steps. We've come up with the possible answers, what you dog people believe, and what some of your reasons are. So let's turn that into a thesis. What would, given what we've just said, what would a possible thesis to this question be? What would one we could give? What for you dog people? What would a dog person's thesis be? And I want just before, I didn't mean to cut you off. That was rude. Sorry. I want you to say from start to finish exactly how it is, and Sakshi, fill in the reason 1, 2, 3 for me here. So
companionship, unconditional love, and there was one more.
Dogs are better pets than cats because they are more loyal and give unconditional love. That right there is an A thesis on a paper that would be on this topic. That's all the thesis is this straightforward statement. And the way you get there is just through these steps. So let's practice the cat people. All right, cat people, let's come up with a thesis. So what are some reasons you as a cat person could give that cats are better? What sorts of reasons might a person give for cats being better? Yeah, they're a lot lower maintenance. What are some other reasons?
Not as active, I feel like.
Yeah, you don't have to take them out to walk on top of them just being like lower maintenance in the house. Also, there are those times that you just kind of want to be left alone and the dog will not leave you alone, but the cat will. They're much more like self-sufficient. So let's go lower maintenance. Also, I think they cost less because generally speaking, they're they're smaller and you don't need to buy them every toy in the world, and they don't chew all your furniture. They scratch it, but I feel like they don't eat your shoes and everything else. All right, so what would our thesis be for a cat person's essay? Cats are better pets than dogs. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not a cat person, actually. I've recently spent some time with a really dumb cat, and I will say there's something truly delightful about spending time with something that stupid. It's just like it has no short-term memory, and it's truly amazing. Like, it was scratching the couch, so I shot it in the face with one of the like water spray cans to get it to stop. And literally 3 seconds later, it had forgotten that I had shot it and was my friend again. I was like, you were just so dumb, cat. So cats are better pets than dogs because they are, well, what are our reasons?
They require less maintenance and
They require less maintenance
cost less.
and cost less. Cost less. Boom. That's a thesis. That's all you're doing. So what I want us to do quickly is you're going to do it on your own. Take out your phone, take out a piece of paper, take out whatever you want to work on. Here's a possible essay, which, again, I'm not asking you to give me a great argument for this. Just practice doing this. Should the death penalty be allowed? Why or why not? I think there are reasons on both sides. So therefore, run through these 3 steps of what questions being asked and what are the possible answers. Which one do you think is right? And what are your reasons? And then write it out in a short 1-sentence thesis right now. I'm going to give you all 5 minutes or so, 3 minutes, however long you need. And then we can just briefly talk about what some of them are, analyze them, and then I will talk about the homework assignment, and then you will be on your way. So take a couple minutes, just write an imaginary, and again, you don't even have to necessarily believe this thesis in the practice case. Just practice writing a thesis to the question, should the death penalty be allowed? Why or why not? And again, here are the steps for, I'm not sure if computer people, yeah, you can kind of see it. Again, you're not being graded on this or anything, just practice. Practice makes perfect as long as you're trying hard. Poor guy. Mostly just impressed. I'm gonna give you all another couple minutes. So it says 8:00. Use this one. It says 8:07. I'll give us till 8:09. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. Just practice. Oh, I know what I can use this time. Yeah, absolutely. What? You mean in terms of it's longer than a sentence, or?
It's. I'll show you.
Okay. Don't worry about it. Whatever's. All right. So let's just run through a couple. What are some things people came up with here, Linda?
A, that we can't play God, and B, that I said this we shouldn't be, and B, that if you're killing somebody for a crime, then you're basically doing the same thing that he probably did. So it's like, how are you different from him?
So let's work with this here of how could we turn this into a single clear thesis? Because what you've got here is the start of an excellent thesis. And because your reason is a little more sophisticated, I see like, yeah, this is going to be hard to say in one sentence. So what would the first step to turning this into a thesis be? Step one, like what would the start of the sentence be? Or the start of the several sentences be, given what?
The death penalty should not be allowed.
Boom. So the first part would be the death penalty should not be allowed. And then what you could do is, because it's a little more sophisticated, and we'll talk more about this next class, you could say something along the line of, there are two main reasons for this. The first is yada, 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 yada. The second is yada, 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 yada. So that is a way in which sometimes if your reasons are a bit longer, it's harder to stuff it into one sentence. So don't be, so if it's a simple set of reasons, you can always do it in one sentence. But if it's something more sophisticated, it's okay to divide it into one sentence on this is what I'm arguing for, and then a couple sentences behind that with the reasons laid out in very broad terms. So Gotti has the weight of human life is impossible to quantify, much less discuss in regards to whether or not it should be taken away. For this reason alone, the death penalty should, if not be reserved for extremely anecdotal situations, not be allowed at all. All right, so things to critique on this one are, you've got a clear statement of the death penalty should be only allowed in extreme situations. One thing I'd say though, generally about, like this is beautifully written. Like I just want to make that clear, Gotti. One thing though is, for the sake of a reader, always, and this is something I'm going to be stressing, always assume the person reading your paper is a complete idiot. Like that is the best way to make sure you're writing at a level that is super clear. So for that reason, try to, even if you have the capability of writing something beautiful, try to also ensure to say it in the most straightforward, clear way possible. So in this case, what I'd say is start with the death penalty should be reserved only for extremely anecdotal situations. And so start with what your claim is, and then bring in the fact that a human life is difficult to quantify. So it is usually better to start with the claim, because this goes back to what we talked about last time, about the goal being to put yourself into the mind of a reader. A reader finds it easier to understand something if they know where it's going before they get there. So an argumentative paper is not like a murder mystery novel. A murder mystery is really boring if you know who did the murder at the start. This sort of paper, though, you want it to be as easy to follow. So you want as early as possible to say what you're going to be arguing for. So let me look at a couple more that Sakshi has. The death penalty should be allowed because some people are truly evil and will continue to poison society. Boom. Clear, concise, short. No, I know exactly what you're going to be arguing for. Sakshi also did the other side. The death penalty shouldn't be allowed because every life has value and humans shouldn't have the right to make a decision to end a life. Boom. Clear thesis. That's all that I'm looking for in the thesis assignment, is something like that. Now, if you want to do something more long and sophisticated, feel free to do that. So what is the thesis assignment actually? Well, I have written up 8 prompts, which are now on the blackboard. They are under, I can't remember what thing they're under.
4 prompts.
Oh, sorry, 4 prompts, 8 possible answers. I've written up 4 prompts. These 4 prompts are each things like so-and-so is trying to start a neo-Nazi website in which he sells like neo-Nazi memorabilia and talks about white supremacy with his friends. Should this be allowed? This is a yes, no sort of question. So therefore, there are two possible answers you could give for it. Yes, he should be able to. No, he shouldn't be able to. And what I'm asking you is for each of the four theses to give a sample, or each of the four topics, give a sample thesis for each of the two possible positions. So 8 total sentences. So you'd write one thesis just to like, you could write one thesis of so-and-so should be allowed to start his website because the First Amendment is sacred and we can't get rid of it. That would be a thesis. I just gave you one. If you use that one, I'm not going to take off points. Like that's all I'm looking for. So just do that for each of the, so it's 2 per 4 for 8 total. That's all I'm looking for. And again, this is going to be graded pass fail. And this is going to be the sort of thing where if you fail, you had to have presumably tried to fail, because I'm going to be very lenient on this. Like if you write, if the question is, should so-and-so be allowed to start a neo-Nazi website, and you provide me with something like sweet potatoes are the best Thanksgiving meal because they're high in nutrients and rather low in carbs compared to other potatoes, I'd consider giving you credit because that is a nicely structured thesis. Like that's the level of you're going to have to really try to fail. Like I'm not going to, it's just practicing thesis statements, because very often it's one of those things of like, keep it simple. Just like when you're arguing, like the topics, these are complex issues, complex topics. So if you can get a clear, concise, simple thesis, then add all the interesting complexity in the argument, the complexity in the writing around that. But generally speaking, the easier it is for the reader to find the thesis, know the thesis, and know generally what you're going to be arguing for, the simpler their life is going to be, which in turn is going to make the grader's life easier, which is in turn going to make your life better. Just generally simple is good in these sorts of things. Are there any questions on the assignment or what a thesis is or anything? Next class, what we're going to talk about is how do we turn a thesis into a plan for a whole paper? And what that basically is, how do I go from I have one nice sentence or a collection of sentences? How do I then decide how to structure a paper around that? How many paragraphs do I choose? How do I decide what goes in which paragraph? Because generally speaking, one of the issues that people most commonly have with paper writing, I'm guilty of this, everyone's guilty of it. You get flustered and then you just try to throw everything you can down on paper as quickly as possible because it's painful and you want it over with. So to avoid doing, but when you do that, it reads like word vomit, and I'm guilty of this. It seems like a stream of consciousness. It's really hard to follow. So one of the best ways to avoid doing this is before you get down and sit in front of the terrifying blank screen, white sheet of paper, you have a plan and you know, in this paragraph, I'm going to be doing this. So if any moment you get flustered, just go back and go, oh, yes, this is my paragraph in which I'm doing blah, blah, blah. I now have a plan. I now cannot get distracted. I'm now not talking about my most recent family vacation because I know the family vacation doesn't go in this paragraph. That's the sort of thing you can do. All right. If no one has any more questions, comments, concerns, feelings, I'm going to, oh, Olivia.
One question.
Yes.
So the thesis has to be 8 sentences?
So no. So each thesis is one sentence.
Okay.
And so here's the way you can think of it. Imagine there's another world in which I am evil. And this evil me decides to make you write 8 papers. If you had to write those 8 papers, what would your thesis be for each one?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In truth, once you've practiced all 8, you are eventually, and the outline assignment, you're only doing it for one of them, whichever one you want to write on. It's just the practice of writing a thesis on all of them will make it easier, 1, to practice theses, and 2, for you to know what you ultimately find the most interesting thing to write on. Sometimes you're just in a hurry and you don't give them all thought. So I want to spread this out, give everyone some time. So each one, like the aim is 1 sentence generally, but if you write a more complicated thesis, like Netza was talking about, it might be a few more. But all I'm looking for is like 8-ish sentences, 1 per possible position. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
So just to be clear, like with the first topic with Carl said decided to start that website. You want us to basically create a thesis. Should Carl be allowed to start this website? Why and why not? Those are
Boom. Yep. You have 1, Carl should be allowed. 2, that would be, Carl should be allowed because yada, yada, yada. And then number 2 would be Carl shouldn't be allowed because blah, blah, blah.
You pretty much broke it down to
Yep.
each one, given all the facts, how should we feel about Brogan?
Yep.
Why? Okay.
Yep,
But how you break it down is to actually create the.
exactly.
Yeah.
Once I've got the breaking down, that's more for once you get to the actual turning it into a full paper thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw everything there, so everything that I think could be useful is all in one place, and you don't have to worry about digging through old notes or anything like that to remember what the key issues are on the topics. All right, if there are no more questions, I'm gonna stop the recording. How do I do this? Stop recording. I'm gonna tell